Marvin and I kept talking about, we get into these big, deep, esoteric, conversations, and I'm like, people are hungry for this stuff, man, because we'd be talking and customers are walking through going, I'm just listening. Yeah. I just want to hear what you guys are talking about. And we're like, you know what, we need to be able to just do this.
Open the dialogue.
So this is a thing where, not during the meditation, but, we want your questions. We want your thoughts, your comments, because it's kind of like, this is how we dive deep, right? This is how we dive deep, is by saying, you know what, I've always been curious about this and I didn't understand it, so now, not that we have all the answers, but we could sure lie to you. No, I'm just joking. But we could truly, I think between the two of us, we could probably at least get close to a legit answer.
Between the two.
Because between what he knows and what I know, we can cover quite a few bases. But if I just don't know, I'm not gonna try to fudge it.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know. That's not my realm.
Yeah.
Marvin's probably been there. He's a universal traveler. I kind of stick to the earthy stuff. Y'all ready for us, Senor?
I'm ready. What is the name of this gathering this evening? I don't even know the name. I just know we're at Goddess I Am Healing and Meditation Center.
Yep, this is the Wednesday night meditation / lecture / Q&A.
AKA Wisdom Wednesdays.
Wisdom Wednesdays. Today we're going to be focusing on the subject of identity and magical identity, self-identity, and how we identify ourselves and other people, and the significance that has spiritually. And so I'm going to begin with a guided meditation, which is short to be led into a silent meditation. And so I have a system that I've set up. I'm going to be approaching you with 3 different characters in the meditation, and they're going to be offering you things, and let's see where your mind goes with it. I'll let you know when the meditation has ended. I'll ring this bell. The meditation will last 20 minutes from start to finish, so at 6:25 I'll bring it all back, and we'll discuss a few things. I have a few questions I want to ask you, and then we'll do a Q&A after that. And so I'll open up the floor for discussion. Alright, so first make yourself comfortable, relax. We have to lower the tone now. Take a few deep breaths. The type of breathing that I tend to do when I'm meditating is called the fourfold breath. I'll take in breath for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, let go for 4 seconds, and then leave it out for 4 seconds, and repeat that. You can breathe any way that you choose, whatever is most comfortable, but you want to be taking in a large amount of oxygen so that your brain has enough.
Tell me the rhythm one more time.
The rhythm. So the rhythm of the fourfold breath is 4 on the intake, holding 4, releasing for 4, and then leaving out for 4. So it is. Allow yourself to calm. Allow your mind to relax. Imagine yourself seated at a stone table in a garden. This day has been prepared for you. You have come seeking assistance with a quest. Once you have sat down at the table for long enough, I encourage you to make your way to the courtyard. You must pass through a wide archway before you go. There is a sacred tree there that has entwined its branches around the archway. To pass through the archway, you must purify yourself. Simply walk through the archway and allow nature and the innocence of the natural world to purify you. Leave the human world behind. A fiery young maiden approaches you as you soon enter the courtyard. dressed in the clothing of a huntress. Animal skins and bones decorate her body. Small living creatures encircle the maiden as well. In her outstretched arms are a quiver and a bow. She gazes eagerly into your eyes and prods you with her offering. Greetings, voyager. I welcome you to our circle. I offer you my gift. It is much better than the gifts of my sisters. This is the bow of Artemis. An arrow fired from this bow will destroy any obstacle it pierces, and I do mean any obstacle. The young maiden's speech is interrupted by a pregnant woman in elegant white robes calling to you from the center of the courtyard. You walk towards her. As you do, the woman walks towards you as well. As she draws closer, you see that she is easily twice your height. Her aura is deeply comforting. You begin to feel like a child in her presence. In her arms, she holds a sheaf of wheat. She kneels down to meet your eyes, and the rich smell of warm, buttery bread engulfs you. There you are, my beloved child. Relax yourself. I offer you my gift. This is the Sheaf of Demeter. The wheat from this bundle, when placed upon any wound, will heal itself instantly, no matter how grievous the wound may be. You may bask in the warmth and light of this sheaf. In contrast to the woman before you, you begin to notice a darkness in the corner of the courtyard. There's a gloomy figure, cloaked in black, and seated at a table. The table is overflowing with herbs, bottles, books, assorted knickknacks, and other curiosities. The person under the cloak will not meet your eye. A gnarled and wrinkled hand appears from beneath the cloak, holding a large gray book. Should you have no need for my sister's tools, I offer you my gift. This is the Book of Athena. Within lies the answers to all questions asked and all questions that have not yet been. A fierce wind begins to blow, obscuring your view of the courtyard. All you can see now are the 3 stone pillars. On the 3 pillars rest 3 sacred objects. The bow that destroys any obstacle, the wheat that heals any wound, and the book that answers any question. You have only time to grasp one of them as the wind sweeps you upwards. You hear the cloaked figure call out, "Farewell, voyager, I send you away now from our circle." You find yourself on your feet, with the path to your quest ahead. Alright, I have a handout, a questionnaire I'd like you all to fill out. That's what you saw. Participate in a little. I'm not going to be looking at each one personally. I'm going to shuffle them all up and just look at the total.
Should be any music at all?
No, we don't need it. Oh, thanks. Are you still recording or?
Yeah.
Alright, cool. So now, today we're going to talk about identity. And now, in the meditation I did, I made sure not to add anything to emphasize who you are. I did things to emphasize who the others were that you were interacting with, but I did not name them. The names I attributed to the items that they were offering you. And if you know anything about witchcraft, you'll know the deities, or Greek mythology, you'll know the deities. And these three deities make up a triple goddess, or a full set of goddesses. Now, the triple goddess is known for having three identities. Is that one being, Hecate, if you've ever heard that name, is a deity that's known as a triple goddess. So she has three identities, and she lives them out in a sequence. Now, on a lot of these, people could either identify themselves the whole time, or not identify themselves, and they could identify the deities. Is that it seems like we do have a way of adding identity to life, and that is either how we look at others or we look at ourselves. And it defines a large polarity in people that I believe is always best brought back to the middle. Is you don't want to add too much emphasis on who you are, but you also don't want to diminish yourself for other people. So when it comes to identity, it's very much something that we don't come into the world with. We develop it. We start to develop skills and act, and then people start to attribute an identity to us. And then at one point as we age, we start to have, what's the word? A dissonance there, where the way that other people see us is not the same way that we see ourselves. And that starts to become a pain. And a lot of people can live their whole life just avoiding this pain. But if you go to it, almost everyone experiences it. If you haven't yet, you will. Is that it's an identity crisis. Who am I? What am I here for? What am I doing? Why? And us as people have to give an answer to that to ourselves. A lot of people will try to instead give an answer to everybody else. In a lot of religions, you'll see people will just go and try and push their religion on everybody because they think that will convince other people of what I believe, and then I can believe it and affirm it through them. And this is a shortcut to having an identity. it's easy to join a group and then feel like you have an identity. But to really form one takes a lot of cultivation. You have to go through hardship. You have to develop through pain. And so you'll see people that have had a very easy life, they have a very shaky identity. They have to hold to a lot of things or they will not feel themselves anymore. Now, think about this. If you were to take everything you own right now, throw it in the garbage, and move to another city, how would you feel? Would you feel the same, that you're the same person, easy, you can just pick up where you left off? Or would a lot of those things cripple you in certain ways? It all has to do with identity. So the subject goes into everything, how you interact with everything. A lot of people have spirituality where they have a deity or a set of spirits that they interact with. And so they identify with those deities usually. If you don't, there's always a sort of confusion as to why you're interacting with the deity. A lot of people have religions that they don't quite agree with. But if they were to study deeper into the religion, they actually might agree with it more because there's a lot of things in there that are humanitarian issues, things that happen to all of us. And this is one of the main topics I want to talk about, and if you have any questions about it, is the connection between all. And this is really on the subject of God and spirituality, but I believe personally that we are all connected, that we are all one being together, experiencing this as a sort of fragmentation, like looking through a kaleidoscope. We take ourselves and throw ourselves in a million places, and then look at ourselves like, oh wow, look, different people. But we're all really one. And so, in the end, I believe identity is an illusion, a necessary illusion to help you get through your life, to say, well, I am this person that does this job, and I'm this person in my family, and it helps you. But in reality, you're the same person you are that you came here as, just blank, clear, open. And so, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, and I think it's always really interesting to try to define yourself without it being what you do or who you are attached to, right? Like if I were to say, the easy answer for me, for example, would be like, oh, I can identify as what I do. But that's not really who I am. That's what I do. But we confuse that, and that can create an ego identity, right? Like, I feel like I have value because of what I do, right? Let's look at doctors, for example. How many doctors have very broad, big, wide egos? Why? Because, I'm just kidding, you're such a silly girl. Because they've identified with, they've aligned to this truth that says doctors are pretty awesome guys and gals, right? And so doctors are kind of here. We ascribe a certain power play to a doctor because we come when we're lost and we don't know what's going on, and they give us an answer. They may not be right, but it's still, we've given them that power to give us that. But if you just strip all of that away, you may have a guy who just kind of likes to golf, hang out, right? Because he's really not the doctor. That's not who he is. That's just what he does. So when we strip all that away, it can get really hard to figure out, well, how would I describe who I am? You know, like if I don't describe myself as wife, mother, business owner, psychic, intuitive, whatever, okay, now we got to get kind of deeper inside of me. Like, who am I? Right? I mean, that really is a question I would love each and every one of you to take home and go, all right, I'm going to mull this one over. Because then at some point you still start ascribing things like, well, I'm a good person. Okay, that's, you know, but it gets really tough. Because we're so used to society telling us, so you're the good girl, you're the bad boy, you're the nice wife, you're the this, you're the that, and we just kind of play into those roles, right? How many times in a family are you're the smart one, you're the pretty one, and you're the baby? Or some mix of that, right? Everybody in a family often, right? And how screwed up do people get? Because, well, my sister was the pretty one, so that means I'm not. And so their whole life, they just think, well, I'm not pretty, even though they may be drop dead gorgeous, but they've taken on the identity of a woman in crisis of self, right? Like she can't see that just being and breathing is beautiful, right? And so we have to kind of keep pushing away these identifying kind of things that society, school, family, jobs, and anything else kind of puts on us, and just see what's left. And really, in the end, it's just, I'm here to have a life and express in ways that hopefully are stimulating for me as a soul to learn from. It's, you know what I mean? It's like, this is why it's not discussed, because it's kind of like you gotta twist your brain a little bit. And we're trying to simplify it so that it becomes something that I want you to be able to go, well, who am I? What am I really about, right? And was it Jonathan Livingston Seagull? It was all about being a flock, right? But then this one seagull's like, but I'm me. And he's right. Like, who are you outside of your flock? Right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm better for being with my flock, because I get to see where maybe I have triggers, or where I have problems, or where I have issues, and they help support me in understanding that, even if it's because I'm kind of feeling that moment upset or angry. But if I go in, it's like, oh wow, look at this part of me, having this emotion about something. It still doesn't define me, but it definitely allows me to see, okay, so you're a person who gets triggered by being treated like you're stupid. Oh, I don't like that. That's some way to identify myself, is I like to be treated kindly. Okay, I can live with that. This means I'm going to treat others kindly, because if that's how I like it, then probably so do they. We don't go there. So, we want you to go there, because you may uncover really interesting things about yourself. What else you got on your little fancy sheet of paper?
We'll open the floor for questions now, or comments. If anybody has questions about that.
Well, I have a comment about identity.
Yeah,
Mm.
So, it's been 5 years since my marriage like totally exploded, and it was like I was identifying with being a wife, and that wasn't the case anymore. So, I struggled with that. Like, I had to rebuild my whole foundation,
Yeah.
which, I mean, thank God that I did, because it's better.
It
I
is.
really have a better sense of self. But when I went to Social Security office to change my name back to my maiden name, I walk out of the Social Security office, and there's a raccoon and 2 baby raccoons in the middle of the day, and at noon. So I mean, it's like, what are you doing here? But you know, I have 2 kids. So, but I looked it up as soon as I got home, and raccoons are about identity. They have the mask on. It's about what you're presenting to the world and your sense of identity. So that's, now when I see a raccoon, I know that's what it's all about. So. It's,
That is a great thing to mention. Yeah, raccoons are very much about that. Is that they play a role. They're very social, and so they do. They have identities in their groups. If I used to feed raccoons, so, I don't know, but there was a big group of them, and they would assemble in a line to get food from me, and you could tell they each had their place. And if one of them tried to get out of line, the other would knock them into place. And so identities they're formed in the moment by collective groups. Because if you were alone, you wouldn't need an identity. Who would you tell about it? It is if you're just sitting there like, hey, I like fishing. And it's like, no one cares, no one's here, no one's listening. You're the only person in existence. And so it's these temporary cohesions between people. And so when those break, you're left with this confusion because you identified with a temporary thing. And so when you build identity, it does have to be, true identity has to be something non-temporary, something permanent about you. And you'll find there are a few things. There are, though. And if you look back to childhood, usually you find it all in childhood. It is from 1 to 10, we do every single thing we want to do, and then we get convinced that we want to do something else.
You mean from age 1 until age 10?
Yeah, if you
Okay.
see them,
Yeah.
they are that way when they grow up, unless
Truly.
they're holding it back.
And that's something that a lot of times in classes I ask people to think about, what were you like when you were 10, when you were 11? What is it you wanted to do? Right? Like, how many people were into art and then somebody told you, no one makes money in art, right? Oh, crushing the dream right there. But what if you came in skilled as an artist? What if that was your passion? What if you could just sit all day and draw or paint or doodle or whatever, right? And somebody sat there and said, that is the worst idea you could do as far as a living. Nobody makes money as an artist. Crush, right? So life crushes us. Sometimes like little girls want to be ballerinas, and then they become big girls and they realize, I'm not quite ballerina sized, right? But right? And so then at some point you're like, okay, so maybe I won't be like a professional ballerina, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't still love to dance. That's right. So, you know, we have to kind of go back, like he's just right, he's so right. Go back and see, what was that passion? What did you, if someone had said when you were 6, what did you want to do? Like, do you remember what you wanted to do when you were somewhere between 6 and 12? What was your big thing? Were you going to be an astronaut, fireman?
Probably. I think like, I don't remember much of that.
No?
Paleontologist,
I think
Yeah,
it was
archaeologist.
marine biology.
marine
Okay.
biologist.
Perfect.
Because my dad took me fishing like twice, so I thought I knew it all.
You probably did. How about you, Sabrina? What do you think your 6 to 12-year-old self wanted?
I remember when I was really little, I wanted to be a brain surgeon.
She wanted to do brain transplants.
Yeah.
Okay. There's
You
a
know.
lot of days I want to transplant some brains that I come across.
I think we're getting there now. In your lifetime, definitely. That'll be a thing.
Wow. I mean, we're not that far off, my guess. Keep going. Who's the guy, Tesla guy?
Oh yeah, Nicola.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. Yeah, he'll probably figure it out. But his will have like nanobots or something in it that can like have you walking not into walls with your eyes closed.
Put your brain in a car.
Yeah.
Just drive around.
Yeah, put your brain in the car and go get milk. Hey, could you go get some milk? Yeah, okay. There you go.
So the next
Milk.
subject I want to talk about is non-identification. And you'll see this in almost every world religion, especially the bigger ones. In the Western religions, they're all about trying to get you to stop being subject to the will of the body, to stop sinning, and to do things a certain way. Now, to do that, you have to be able to prevent your identity from flourishing. Is that you're saying, I need to put up these walls here. Now, what that was originally meant to do was get you to stop identifying as the person doing all of those things, so that then you could possibly stop doing them if that's what you wanted to do. In Eastern religions, in Buddhism, they teach you to detach from the self. Is that the self is full of desire, and desire causes all of your suffering. And if you take a look at your life, that's very accurate. Everybody's nodding. And so it is that your desire causes your suffering. So the Buddhist method is simply abandon desire and you will no longer suffer. And now I dare you all to go and try that today. And next Wednesday we'll talk about how you did not succeed at ending desire. Because if you do stop desiring, you just realize that you're desiring to stop desiring, and it just ends up in this loop where you're still trying to accomplish something. And so Zen Buddhism comes into play, where you were simply just trying to constantly abandon desire, to just let go of it in every moment. And so it's very much a lifelong practice to try to get into. But at one point you can stop identifying as the self. And when you do, life becomes very, almost just ethereal. Everything still happens the same way, but it doesn't seem to faze you. And that's because there's no identity to be affected by anything. And so if you see all of the Zen masters, they're not the typical like high priests you would see in most religions. They're goofy, they'll smoke cigarettes or kick somebody. They do whatever they want to do in the moment because they finally were able to let go of these conditions that we have in our mind. We're always telling ourselves about our own actions. As you think, oh, I should go eat breakfast, and then you consider a million things instead of just going and eating something. Because there's reasons to. They poison the food in our world, and there's all sorts of traps, and you don't know what you're getting yourself, what you're eating half of the time. But that's forced us into this constant state of thinking. And when you think, you build and build on your ego and on your identity. You can never truly get rid of the ego, because if you do, you would just be spaceless. You would just be completely delirious without a central focal point. But almost every religion has this pressure to escape from the self, from who you are, and simply to just be righteous or free or liberated, and to achieve nirvana or Valhalla, to just completely blow the mind away. And the fact is, unless you go completely psychotic, you can't. You always do identify with the self eventually. So really, the main point of non-identification is only to allow you to see the way you treat yourself and the way you look at yourself and the way you label yourself, and allow you to make changes to that. That leads about non-identification. Okay. And so in magic and in mysticism, there's a lot of practices that involve forming a temporary identity. If you've ever heard of somebody invoking something, an invocation is to bring about something within the self, is the literal translation of what that word means. And so a lot of Wiccan priests and priestesses will invoke the deities and try to embody them. And to do that, you have to behave the way that they are structured. And this goes back to Egypt. This goes back to actually what these gods and deities were originally for. And they were role models or examples of what human beings could be. And so this is almost the entire point of the Egyptian gods, where they were not really gods. They were called Neteru, and they were forces of nature. And so they saw that if mankind could break away from their own nature and behave in the way of the natural forces around them, that they would benefit greatly from that, and they learned how to. And so what this is called in a lot of practices is taking God forms, or assuming God forms. And so if you've ever seen somebody try to embody the goddess Isis, and to just take in that energy and hold that space and feel that way, it begins to change your consciousness, and you begin to feel the way that deity feels. And so it's not a very easy thing to do once you actually start to practice it. It'll take your breath away when you start to experience it. And so another thing I recommend if you're trying to do that is to do what's called, it's called shape-shifting, but it's not that extreme. You can't actually turn into animals like in Harry Potter. Not yet, unless you had enough energy behind it. But if you form the mind into an animal, that really taps you into the earth and to where we come from. Because humans came from a lineage of incredible ancestry. Beings that walked around, climbed in trees, crawled on the ground, swam in mud, swam in the ocean. We have all of that in our blood from the past. And if you tap into the part of your mind that is similar to that shape-wise, you'll feel that experience. Because if you start thinking about frogs right now, and just really focus on frogs, picture one in your mind's eye, view yourself as a frog, you'll begin to feel it. And this is not something people do unless they're, 10 years old. And that's one of the big secrets of magic is kids are already doing it the whole time. Is they're the most magical beings on the planet. Is you're tapping into your imagination to create an identity, which is different than what you have been labeled with by everyone else. And so that gives you sovereignty over your identity. When you say, you know what, today I'm a bear, and you just walk around and if somebody says hello to you, you go, "Rrr," and you go and buy salmon and you eat that, you'll see it'll change the way you think heavily, and the next day it'll be different. And that's enough to shake you into changing your life, if that's the place you're in. If you're in a state where you want to change things, then change the way you see yourself. Somebody has to have something to say.
I'm just thinking of that guy who's like trying to be a werewolf. I can't think of his name. I've seen him on TV. He's like all hairy, like a I can't think. I'm
Is
sure.
he like taking hormones and stuff?
I don't know. I just seen this guy. He's like he wants to be like a werewolf or ape so bad. It's just crazy. But it goes into this thing. You believe it, you can achieve it. So.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. In the art community, there's a lot of anthropomorphic personification. You've seen this your whole life. Bugs Bunny, Roger Rabbit, Daffy Duck. We want to take animals and make them do human things, but we don't like to see humans doing animal things, is the funny thing. And that's almost this strangeness we have with the animal kingdom where we're trying to make it human. And I believe that there's a lot of unhealthy things in that because it doesn't go both ways. Is it saying, animals are lesser than humans, they need to start getting jobs and paying taxes and learning how to drive cars, and that's what we need, that's what we're seeing in cartoons. But the thing is, cartoons are geared towards children, and so they're taking it and running with it, and their animal natures are getting twisted. And I always thought it was so ironic that Looney Tunes was called Looney Tunes, where loony or lunacy comes from lunar, which has to do with werewolves. If you go back to it, is that they would say people go crazy on the full moon. You can see this now, is that if it's the full moon, driving is bad, people are nuts, they're acting funny.
ERs are full.
Yeah.
Babies come.
Babies are coming.
The water in our brains are just being pulled up, and that's doing all sorts of stuff to us. We're mostly water.
Mm-hmm.
And so the moon really changes us. Now, it changes our animal nature. In occultism, the moon has always been associated with our subconscious, which is that part of ourselves that we don't like to show people. And so the animal is void of that. The animal does not have a subconscious from what I've seen of them. When I look at them, they are genuinely who they are in every moment, constantly being who they are. They don't do what humans do with rumination. Is they think, they process, but they don't double process, which seems to be what divides the human kingdom from the animal kingdom. If you think about something right now, you can think about what you were thinking about. You can think about if you should have been thinking about that. You can think about if you should be thinking about if you should be thinking about that. And you can create this kind of haywire feedback in the mind. And I feel like if an animal did that, you would see it. You'd see your dog just sitting there one day like that, if they're under stress. But they don't act that way. When they're under stress, you see it immediately. They start chewing on themselves, or they start biting things, or trying to attack. Humans have to hold their reality in. And so letting people just be animals doesn't work. We'd all just be doing horrible things. And so Zen Buddhism has a practice of taking people and saying, we're going to put you in a community where we're allowing you to express certain animal freedoms under severe supervision. And these people are allowed to let that part of themselves out. And what happens is it purifies very quickly in the human soul, is that we are not the same as a dog or a cat or a frog, because we have these bodies that have developed these extremely large frontal lobes for processing things. That's the part that's doing this thinking about thinking. And it gives us a lot of issues, but it also lets us do a lot. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish. I mean, do you want to live your whole life and then you die and there was no real point to it in your eyes. That's the thing propelling most people. They're like, I want some purpose. And to really get there, you have to clear everything else out. And so that's what a lot of identity work is about, is getting rid of the things that are not actually what you're trying to do. Because those are the things that are wasting all of your time. And if you get those out of the way, it's just you, 24/7, and you get a lot more done that way.
I think if we look at animals, and like a cat's just a cat, right? The cat's thinking about food, nice sunny spot, wants to make sure its little territory is kind of protected. The cat's always the cat. And so it's almost like, I think we've got humans at one end of the pendulum swing and we've got animals. And somewhere in the middle is really where it could be. Like, I think we've gotten so off track with the thinking about not thinking of things we should, but shouldn't, would, what? And so then we end up doing this, right? And the rabbit's just thinking, I just like some nice clean grass. I'm hungry, I think I'll eat. We've got to process, and so it's kind of like, I love kind of tapping into the natural world and seeing like, okay, in the end I really don't need to be thinking as much as I'm thinking. I've got the capacity to think, but we also have the capacity to overthink. So it's kind of like, sometimes I look at my cats and I'm like, you just want a nice comfy spot, don't you? And I'm trying to solve the world's problems, right? Like, how is COVID affecting all of us? And it's like, but does that rumination actually solve anything? It just wastes my time. When really, I could just curl up in a nice cozy spot and have herself a nice nap. And everything would be a good day. So I just think it's important that we kind of remember that it's not that we want to be an animal, but we could certainly take some of our cues on what will help us sometimes from the animal world. Like, the cat only wants to be the cat. The cat's never trying to be the squirrel. The dog is just trying to be the dog. Just try to be yourself. Like, I don't need to try to be Marvin, because Marvin's Marvin. I just need to try to figure out how to be me. The best me I can be without making it all about something that my ego thinks I ought to be, or what I think society expects of me, right? And I really learned this when I was planning my trip to Glastonbury to do priestess training. Is someone said, well, why do you want to go do that? Is it just like a girls' trip? You're just going to go, yah, sisterhood it? And I said, I just want to be a girl in the room. Because having this center, everybody has a certain expectation that I'm going to be, I don't know, dropping wisdom. Or that I'm going to be
You're gonna be
knowing
floating
it.
in, like
I'm going to what?
you're gonna be like floating in.
Yeah, I'm just going to know everything. I'm going to float in. Like, there's all these expectations that are, like, sometimes I just want to be a girl in the room. And that was one thing that I realized, wow, that's something I kind of crave, is just being a person without anybody putting any expectations on me. Like, I was really struggling with the weight of that at some point. Like, woof, wow, that's kind of heavy. And then Marvin, when he started working in the shop, goes, I get it. I had no idea how much. So everybody wants some kind of part of you, or they want to ask a question, or they need something from you. He goes, I had no idea it was this much. And it's like, I'm dancing as fast as I can to try to keep it all going, right?
Yeah,
But sometimes I just want to be the girl in the room, right? Let's all just be girls and boys in the room. No expectation. Like, I don't need to think that you're, going to outdance me because you're the tango queen. We're just girls together. And sometimes that's just so freeing. And we don't realize how tangled up we've gotten in something until it either gets really big, or like when you got divorced, it just drops away and they're like, whoa. That was a big part of the way I held on to my thoughts about myself and my identity. So it's interesting to mull these over without going too far and losing yourself in the mulling. But I think it's an important thing to mull. Like, where am I in the scheme of things?
When you're talking about self-actualization and realizing your identity, and you're talking about children, when they're about 2 or 3, they realize that they are their own person, which causes the terrible twos. Like,
Mhm.
we're testing boundaries and seeing what I can get away with.
The word
Because I'm trying
no.
to be my own person. And,
Exactly.
and it's, I mean, that's a perfect example of
Yeah.
trying to figure out who am I and what is my role and can I live without my mom and like I'm a separate person than they are. That's really that source of when identity starts.
Mhm. Because then what do parents say? If you're a good girl, you can have ice cream after dinner. So now you want to identify with, well, I'm a good girl,
Yeah.
right? Because I want that ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
So we start it early, right? Or we'll tell them, don't be bad, stop being bad. And it's like, it's hard to sometimes, like I can remember telling my kids, I'm not mad at you, I don't like this behavior. And they'd be like,
What?
because they can't separate out what they're doing and themselves.
Right.
Because it's all them, because they've decided that I want that car that you're not buying me at Target, so I'm gonna throw a
I'm
tantrum.
gonna do whatever I can do to get what I want.
That's right.
That's in the letters Peter wrote when he was in jail or in prison, where he said, the body sins, but I don't want it to. I'm trying to be righteous, but the body makes me sin. Where it's like when we identify with what we're doing, then we're trapped. And so sin, I don't really believe in the concept of it, is that it's animal nature, that they're just trying to rise above. So they call it sin and try to do it, but
It's a control
however you want to
mechanism.
take the philosophy of that religion. But it's a really good statement to say that, yes, what the body does is not who I am. Is that the body needs to eat, but it's not like I am a person, I am the eating thing, the guy who eats, the eater of food. It's like if I identify with that, it makes no sense. And so if you, like I work as a psychic, if I identify with being a psychic, and then, I'm 125 years old and I can't do it anymore and I'm just sitting there, then it's like, well, I guess I can't identify as that anymore. And so what do you do when you pass on? And believe me, when you pass on, it keeps going. And so you have to keep coming up with things to be and to feel.
But it's like the kid throwing the tantrum is just being their true self. In that moment. They are expressing those emotions in a verbal, physical, and a very, trying to the parent way. But they're just being super honest, which is like, I'm so mad because I want this and you're not letting me have it. But of course, as a parent, you're like, hey, stop it, knock it off, don't do that. You're not getting this toy, you're bad, you're not And we just heap this shit on them instead of saying, I get it, I'd be pissed off too if I couldn't get the car I wanted. But it's not happening today. Right? But we have to feel like we've got to say, you knock it off, you better behave, and it's like, what is behave?
Right, they're in the right.
They're actually being as truthful as we could ask them to be, which is, I'm so pissed off. I don't know how to express it, so I've got to shake my body and I've got to scream and cry and it's like, God, wouldn't you love to do that? Like when someone cuts in line in front of you and you're like, I'm so pissed at you cutting in line in front of me. How much fun would that be? Like that would be me being truthful, not like sitting there going,
I bet people wouldn't cut in line as much.
who do you think you
That was like what happened.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah,
I think it would. I think we should have an experiment. Bring us that next week. I would love to be in a store and have someone say, hey, what do you think you're doing cutting in line like that? I mean, I am that person that will say, excuse me, there is a line.
Yeah.
I'm always that person.
But you won't throw a temper tantrum.
I don't throw a temper tantrum, but it was like,
So you get back in the line where you were.
Right. I'm so mad. You're being disrespectful. I don't even know how I would respond. But it would be nice to just be able to emote the truth. Like, hey, what are you doing? Because how many times have we suffered in silence with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, tell Monique's like that. She'll say it.
Like
But
you
you
see,
can't
like
do that.
and you'll be in line with someone else, and they'll be like, and they're like,
I'm just the kind of ignore people person.
Except nobody says anything, right?
But it's always amazing to see someone do that. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, where's your ego? Do the rest of us not count? Is it all about, but we don't say anything. We just like stew. Now, a little kid's not going to stew. A little kid's going to be like, hey,
Yeah,
why did
no
you go
filter.
there? You're not supposed to be there.
There's
And as mom, you're like, shh, shh, shh. It's like, God, why
There's
do we
no
do that?
ruminating yet. They
Right.
haven't learned a cycle yet.
Yeah.
Which is really, that's the way to be, is you're healthier
Truthful.
that way.
Just be truthful.
That's why kids don't have all the health problems adults have. 'Cause they're just flowing. When you flow, you have energy.
And then kids get in trouble at school, bless you, because they talk in school, right? Or they're bored. Well, instead of them saying, I'm bored with this class. Can you imagine if we got to be that truthful all the time? Like, you're such a boring teacher. Make this fun.
Right.
I had an econ teacher that I think was really slipping mentally, and he would be like, okay, so today we're going to talk about macroeconomics. So the definition of and we'd all be like, excuse me? Excuse me? And he would go, what? It's like, we didn't hear you. And he's like, I said macroeconomics is the basis of all. And we'd all be like looking at each other like, oh my God, is anyone getting this? Because like, we're getting tested tomorrow, right? But we're sitting there like lemmings, too polite to really say, excuse me, teacher, you are cutting the last 4 words of every sentence were like,
He's just tired.
we're gone. I think so. It was nutty. It was nutty, but nobody felt like they could say something.
So we're running out of time tonight, so I just want to share one quick personal story before we go. And so it's very
do
relevant.
tell.
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, I grew up in a pretty rough little area. And so I had my punk kid identity, and I had a bunch of punk little friends. And I had a friend named Larry, and I won't tell you his last name, but he was so about his name. Every time we would drink together, and he'd be like, man, I'm Larry. And then someone would be like, do you want another beer? And he'd be like, yeah, I'm Larry. Larry has another beer. I'm Larry. And he'd grab the beer, and he'd open it, and be like, man, this is Larry's beer. Larry's having a good time. And he just, second person all the time, Larry. I'm Larry. And so this was when I was 16. Yeah, I drank when I was 16.
I was worried he was going to be 12.
Yeah. And so Larry was in his 20s, a bit older than me. But my name was, I had a nickname 6, the number 6, and because it was my apartment number. Because that's what you do, is you just grab whatever name you got. And I left one day. I lived in West Palm. I was 16, and I kind of just was able to support myself just as I went. I was very resourceful, magically. And so I went to Fort Lauderdale and just started trying to hang out with people and live a life there. I changed my name. I called everybody there. I told everyone my name was Joe. And then I did it again. I went to Jupiter to work for an uncle of mine doing drywall. And there, I didn't tell anybody my name was 6 or my name was Joe. I told everyone my name was Marvin. And then I came to Naples, and I was telling people my name was Joe. I just kept changing my name everywhere I went because I saw the value in playing with identity, is that it broke my way of looking at myself every time. And so every place I went, I had this opportunity, like you were saying, where I'm just somebody. And when you don't even have a name, the amount of freedom you experience is incredible. It is so incredible. It's what animals feel. I know it. Until we start naming them,
Yeah.
Mittens. But it's just, you're just there, and you're you. And so, 10 years later, I went back. I went back to West Palm. My mom lives there, so I go there occasionally. And I saw Larry. I found Larry. And sure enough, I said, I'm like, man, let's hang out, let's get a beer. And we go to this bar, and so we go to the bartender, And the guy's like, "Oh, Larry!" And he hands him the beer, and he's like, "Yeah, that's Larry's beer." He's like, "This is Larry's beer, man. I'm Larry. Yeah, it's good to see you, man. I'm Larry." And I'm like, "How you doing?" He's like, "Good, man. Still being Larry. Still doing the same thing." And sure enough, he was still doing the same thing. Just having a drink, being Larry. And watching boxing. He liked boxing. But in those 10 years, I went to 4 different cities, had numerous groups of people that I interacted with. I had horrible things happen to me, wonderful things happen to me, all sorts of experiences that 6 would not have ever had. And had I brought that ego, that identity with me, I would have stayed that same punk kid that basically I liked getting into fights and partying. It is like there was not much to me yet. And so
I so don't see you fighting.
I know.
That's like, I'm sitting there trying to think.
I'm a trained martial artist. And I don't do anything with it. You learn, you don't want to hurt people.
Right.
That's what you learn, learning how to fight. It is the first person that you hit. If you have anything going on inside,